Flight attendant slaps passenger, not knowing she's the airline CEO. What could possibly happen after a stressed flight attendant dismissively slaps an elderly passenger who doesn't look like she belongs in first class? You won't believe the stunning twist when the passenger is revealed to be the airline CEO, uncovering a shocking conspiracy designed to sabotage her leadership. Like, subscribe, and listen now to hear the incredible full story of mistaken identity and corporate intrigue. The line at Gate K-12 for Horizon Air Flight 815 to San Francisco shuffled forward with weary impatience. Caroline Whitmore, a flight attendant whose crisp uniform couldn't quite conceal the fatigue and frustration shadowing her eyes, scanned boarding passes with brisk, almost aggressive efficiency. The stress of understaffing, delays, and demanding passengers had worn her professional veneer thin today. When an elderly woman with soft white hair and simple, unassuming clothes stepped forward, presenting a first-class ticket, Caroline paused, her gaze openly skeptical. "First class?" Caroline questioned, her voice sharp, carrying over the terminal noise. "Are you sure, ma'am? This is the priority lane." She didn't take the offered boarding pass. The woman, Meredith Winslow, met Caroline's challenging gaze with surprising calm. "Yes, quite sure. Seat 2A. Caroline scoffed lightly, rolling her eyes. "Doesn't look like you belong up front." Probably confused. She waved a dismissive hand towards the side. "Step over there, please. You're holding up the line for the actual first-class passengers." Meredith stood her ground, holding out the boarding pass again. "Perhaps you could just scan it?" Exasperated, and feeling the pressure of the impatient queue behind Meredith, Caroline snapped. In a gesture less of violence and more of utter, contemptuous dismissal, she reached out and lightly, but unmistakably, smacked the back of Meredith's offered hand away, the boarding pass fluttering to the floor. "I said, move, old woman. Don't play games." A collective gasp rippled through the passengers closest to the encounter. Phones already out, tilted slightly, recording the shocking breach of professional conduct. The air crackled with sudden, stunned silence. Caroline instantly regretted the physical contact, her face flushing, but her pride and stress kept her from immediate apology. Meredith Winslow simply looked down at her hand, then back up at Caroline, her expression unreadable, not angry, not hurt, but filled with a profound, assessing quietness that was somehow more unsettling than any outburst would have been. What had Caroline just done? And who was this woman who reacted to public humiliation with such unnerving poise? Meredith Winslow, 72, was a legend in the aviation industry, though few would recognize her on sight these days. Decades ago, she had founded Horizon Air with 2 leased propeller planes and an audacious vision of connecting smaller communities with affordable, reliable air travel. Through sheer grit, business acumen, and an unwavering commitment to customer service and employee respect, she had built it into a major national carrier. While she remained chairman of the board in the company's guiding spirit, she had largely stepped back from day-to-day operations, preferring a quieter life, though she still held immense influence and occasionally traveled, sometimes discreetly in coach, sometimes in first class, using her own name to observe her airline's operations firsthand, believing you couldn't understand the company from an ivory tower. She dressed comfortably, valuing practicality over luxury, often appearing more like a kindly grandmother than a corporate titan. Horizon Air, however, was facing turbulent times. Increased competition from budget carriers, rising fuel costs, and demanding Wall Street expectations had put pressure on margins. A faction within the company, led by the ambitious and ruthless senior VP of operations, Richard Vance, felt Meredith's focus on employee well-being and customer experience was outdated, hindering profitability. Vance, a slick executive known for his sharp elbows and focus on bottom-line metrics, was subtly consolidating power, fostering a high-pressure environment among frontline staff, rewarding aggressive efficiency while quietly undermining managers loyal to Meredith's founding principles. He made no secret of his belief that Meredith should fully retire, leaving the tough decisions to a new generation, namely him. Caroline Whitmore, 35, was caught in the crosscurrents. A generally competent flight attendant with 10 years of service, she was also dealing with personal pressure, student loan debt, a sick parent that made her job security feel precarious. She felt the squeeze from management, the constant push for faster turnaround times, stricter adherence to rigid rules, and the implicit message that customer complaints reflected poorly on her performance. Richard Vance's office frequently circulated memos highlighting efficiency metrics, creating an atmosphere where empathy sometimes felt like a liability. Caroline found herself becoming shorter with passengers, quicker to anger. The joy she once found in her job slowly eroding under the relentless pressure, making her susceptible to poor judgment, especially on stressful days like this one. Beside Meredith at the gate stood Isabel Moreau, her sharp, loyal executive assistant for the past 5 years. Isabel, in her late 20s, was Meredith's eyes and ears within the company, fiercely protective of her boss and deeply wary of Richard Vance's ambition. She handled Meredith's schedule, filtered her communications, and often accompanied her on these observational trips, discreetly noting service inconsistencies or employee morale issues. Isabel was aware of the internal politics, the rumors surrounding Vance, and the pressure frontline staff like Caroline were under. She just hadn't anticipated witnessing such a blatant, shocking lapse in conduct directed at the unassuming founder of the airline herself. The smack, though light, echoed in the sudden hush at gate K-12. Passengers stared, phones capturing the moment. Caroline Whitmore froze, the angry flush on her face draining away, replaced by dawning horror. What had she done? She had let the stress, the pressure, her own simmering resentment boil over into physical contact with a passenger. Meredith Winslow calmly bent down, picked up her boarding pass from the floor, and smoothed it out, her movements deliberate, unhurried. She looked back at the now pale and trembling flight attendant. Before Meredith could speak, Isabel Moreau stepped forward, her voice low but carrying authority, addressing Caroline directly. "Caroline," Isabel said, her eyes narrowed. "Do you have any idea who you just assaulted?" Caroline shook her head mutely, bracing for the inevitable passenger complaint, the write-up, perhaps suspension. Isabel leaned closer. "That," she whispered, gesturing towards Meredith, "is Meredith Winslow, founder, chairman of the board, and majority shareholder of Horizon Air." The color drained completely from Caroline's face. Her knees felt weak. Meredith Winslow, the legendary figure whose portrait hung in the training center, the woman whose founding principles were supposedly the bedrock of the airline. She stared at the kindly, unassuming elderly woman she had just publicly humiliated and physically dismissed. It wasn't just a mistake. It was career suicide, a catastrophic error in judgment. She opened her mouth, but only a strangled gasp came out. Meredith raised a hand gently, silencing both Isabel and Caroline's impending, likely incoherent apology. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet but firm, carrying an unexpected weight. "Ms. Whitmore," she said, addressing Caroline formally, "we will discuss this incident later. For now," she glanced towards a waiting plane, "you have a job to do. Passengers are waiting. Please proceed with boarding." Her composure was absolute, almost unnerving. There was no anger, no demand for immediate retribution, just a calm instruction to continue her duties. This reaction, more than any shouting could have, underscored the magnitude of Caroline's transgression. The inciting incident wasn't just the slap. It was Meredith's utterly unexpected, calm response, coupled with the revelation of her identity. It instantly transformed the situation from a simple, though egregious, customer service failure into something far more complex. Meredith's initial goal wasn't retribution, but understanding. Why would a flight attendant, even a stressed one, behave this way towards any passenger, let alone do so publicly? What did this incident say about the current state of her airline? Her reaction was one of deep disappointment, sharp curiosity, and a quiet resolve to investigate the root cause. Caroline's reaction was sheer panic, fear, and the dawning, sickening realization that her career, and potentially more, hung precariously in the balance, entirely dependent on the mercy of the woman she had just profoundly disrespected. The flight to San Francisco promised to be the longest, most tension-filled journey of her life. Word of the incident spread through the aircraft like wildfire before the doors even closed. Flight attendants exchanged hushed whispers and wide-eyed glances. Passengers who had witnessed the event murmured amongst themselves, occasionally stealing glances towards the front cabin where Meredith Winslow sat calmly in seat 2, looking out the window, and towards Caroline Whitmore, who moved through the cabin like a ghost, her face pale and drawn. By a stroke of either deliberate irony or calculated instruction from someone higher up alerted via Isabel Moreau, Caroline found herself assigned primarily to the first-class cabin for this flight. Every interaction with Meredith was excruciating. Offering a pre-departure beverage, her hand trembled so badly she nearly spilled it. I'm so profoundly sorry, Miss Winslow, she stammered, unable to meet Meredith's eyes. Thank you, Miss Whitmore, Meredith replied politely, her tone neutral. Perhaps just some water. Throughout the 5-hour flight, the dynamic remained the same. Caroline attended to Meredith with trembling, excessive deference, apologizing repeatedly under her breath. Meredith remained composed, polite, accepting the service without comment, but her observant eyes missed nothing Caroline's frayed nerves, the forced smile she gave other passengers, the subtle signs of intense stress. Meredith occasionally asked quiet, pointed questions, not about the incident itself, but about the job. Are staffing levels adequate on this route? Miss Whitmore, do you feel supported by management when dealing with operational pressures? What's the biggest challenge facing frontline crew these days? Caroline answered haltingly, offering practiced, non-committal responses, terrified of saying the wrong thing. She felt trapped, scrutinized, unsure if Meredith was testing her, tormenting her, or genuinely seeking information. Meanwhile, Isabel Moreau, seated discreetly nearby, was an idol. Using her encrypted company messaging app, she communicated with trusted contacts back at headquarters and among the flight crew. She quickly picked up on the prevailing narrative in the crew rumor mill. Richard Vance was cracking down hard, implementing stricter performance reviews, focusing intensely on on-time departures and ancillary sales quotas. Several flight attendants felt immense pressure, fearing for their jobs if they didn't meet Vance's increasingly demanding targets. There were whispers that Vance deliberately created stressful conditions to weed out older crew members or those perceived as less efficient, potentially including Caroline, who had recently received a minor disciplinary note, perhaps unfairly, initiated by Vance's office. Isabel relayed this information discreetly to Meredith via tablet. It began to paint a picture. Caroline's deplorable action might not have occurred in a vacuum. It could be the result of a toxic pressure cooker environment deliberately fostered by Richard Vance. The primary obstacle for Meredith was getting confirmation. Caroline was too terrified to speak openly. The rumors Isabel gathered were just that, rumors. Proving Vance's deliberate strategy to destabilize operations or pressure employees into making mistakes would be difficult. The complications grew. Several passengers who had filmed the boarding incident had already uploaded the videos. By the time the flight landed in San Francisco, Horizon Air slap was trending. News outlets were picking up the story. The airline's reputation was taking an immediate public hit. Meredith knew she had to act decisively, not just regarding Caroline, but regarding the potential systemic issues and the man likely orchestrating them, Richard Vance. The stakes had escalated beyond one employee's career. The integrity and future direction of Horizon Air were now clearly in play. Back in the corporate suites of Horizon Air headquarters later that week, the storm raged. The viral videos of the slapping incident had ignited a media firestorm and internal panic. Calls for Caroline Whitmore's immediate termination were loud and numerous, both internally and externally. Richard Vance, publicly feigning outrage, privately used the incident in closed-door meetings to argue that Meredith Winslow's soft, outdated leadership style fostered undisciplined employees and damaged the brand, implying stronger, more decisive leadership, his own, was needed. Meredith, however, remained methodical. She reviewed the incident reports, Caroline's personnel file, including the recent disciplinary note from Vance's department, and the intelligence Isabel Moreau had gathered about crew pressure and Vance's management style. She also commissioned a discreet internal audit of Vance's operational directives and communications. The turning point came when the internal audit team, perhaps tipped off by Isabel or a loyal IT employee wary of Vance, uncovered a series of encrypted emails between Richard Vance and a small group of dissident, influential shareholders known to be critical of Meredith's leadership. The emails, sent via private servers, laid bare Vance's strategy. He explicitly discussed creating maximum operational friction and encouraging strict enforcement actions by frontline supervisors, like Caroline, to generate negative customer experiences and news cycles. The goal, one email from Vance read, is to demonstrate a pattern of instability under current leadership. Winslow values grace over results. We need incidents that highlight the cost of that weakness. Pressure the crews, document every passenger complaint, amplify the noise. The board will have no choice but to seek new leadership before the next earnings report. There it was, irrefutable proof. Caroline Whitmore hadn't just snapped under pressure. She had been a pawn, perhaps unknowingly, in Richard Vance's deliberate, calculated campaign to sabotage Meredith and seize control of Horizon Air. The incident at the gate wasn't an isolated failure. It was an engineered symptom of Vance's corrupt ambition. This revelation fundamentally changed Meredith's perspective and her course of action. Her initial goal to understand and appropriately address Caroline's conduct was now subsumed by a much larger, more critical objective: to expose Richard Vance's treachery, protect the airline from his machinations, and root out the toxic culture he was fostering. Firing Caroline now felt insufficient, almost like blaming the victim while letting the true culprit escape. Meredith realized she was in a fight for the soul of her company. She made a decision that stunned Isabel and her closest advisors. She wouldn't fire Caroline Whitmore yet. Instead, she would confront her, not with accusations, but with an opportunity for truth, hoping to turn Vance's pawn into a key witness against him. It was a risky, unconventional strategy, relying on compassion in the face of corporate warfare. This was Meredith's point of no return. She was no longer just observing. She was actively fighting back against the coup attempt, armed with evidence and an unexpected belief in the possibility of redemption, even for the employee who had publicly humiliated her. Meredith summoned Caroline Whitmore to her office. Caroline arrived pale and trembling, expecting termination. Instead, Meredith invited her to sit, offering her a glass of water, her demeanor calm and serious, not accusatory. Ms. Whitmore, Meredith began quietly. The incident at Gate K-12 was unacceptable, damaging, and deeply disappointing. Under normal circumstances, it would warrant immediate dismissal. Caroline flinched, tears welling in her eyes. Ms. Winslow, I know. There's no excuse. I was stressed. I wasn't thinking. I am so sorry. I appreciate the apology. Caroline, Meredith interrupted gently but firmly. But I'm less interested in excuses right now, and more interested in understanding why. Horizon Air prides itself on respect. What pressures, what circumstances led a 10-year veteran flight attendant to react that way toward the passenger? She paused, her gaze steady. Was anyone encouraging, or perhaps even implicitly demanding, that kind of strict enforcement? Meredith's unexpected question, her focus on the why rather than just the what, seemed to break something in Caroline. The carefully constructed dam of fear and professionalism crumbled. Tears streamed down her face as she confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush of guilt and desperation. She spoke of the relentless pressure from Richard Vance's office, the constant emphasis on metrics over people, the fear of disciplinary action over minor infractions, the specific warnings she'd received after a previous minor customer complaint, warnings delivered by Vance himself, hinting that her job depended on being firmer and less accommodating, especially during boarding. He said, some passengers just need to be put in their place quickly to maintain order, Caroline sobbed. I felt like if I didn't show, I was tough, especially after that write-up. I'd be next on his list to be let go. I panicked. I was wrong, so wrong, but I was scared. Meredith listened patiently, her expression compassionate but firm. She now had her confirmation, a first-hand account of Vance's coercive tactics. Thank you for your honesty, Caroline, Meredith said finally. It doesn't excuse your actions, but it does provide context. Mr. Vance has created an environment where fear trumps respect. And that, her voice hardened, is something I will not tolerate at my airline. The regrouping began immediately. Meredith knew she needed more than just Caroline's testimony, which Vance could easily dismiss as a disgruntled employee trying to save her job. She brought Isabel Morrow back in, along with Daniel Shapiro, the trusted aviation journalist Meredith occasionally confided in. Richard Vance is actively sabotaging this airline to force me out, Meredith stated bluntly, sharing the emails and Caroline's confession. We need to expose him quickly and decisively before he does more damage. Their new goal was clear: gather corroborating evidence of Vance's conspiracy and present it airtight to the board. Isabel would work internally, discreetly seeking other employees willing to speak, even anonymously, about Vance's pressure tactics or specific directives. Daniel Shapiro would use his journalistic skills to investigate Vance's external dealings with the disgruntled shareholders acting alone or outside forces involved. He specifically looked for any unusual financial activity or connections Vance might have. Caroline offered a chance at redemption, agreed to cooperate fully, providing detailed accounts of her interactions with Vance and potentially wearing a wire if deemed legally necessary and safe. The alliance was formed, their strategy now focused on a high-level corporate takedown. The investigation kicked into high gear, operating under intense secrecy. Isabel Moreau, leveraging the trust many longtime employees had in Meredith, found several other flight attendants and gate agents willing to provide confidential statements detailing Vance's bullying management style, unrealistic performance targets, and implicit encouragement to prioritize speed over customer care, sometimes using coded language in memos about streamlining interactions. Daniel Shapiro, meanwhile, followed the money trail. He discovered that several of the dissident shareholders pushing for Meredith's ouster had recently received significant, unexplained influxes of capital routed through opaque investment vehicles. Digging deeper, using financial database tools and off-the-record sources in the financial sector, he found tentative links between these vehicles and shell corporations previously associated with the notorious Black Widow crime syndicate, an organization known for infiltrating legitimate businesses for laundering purposes. The possibility emerged. Was Vance merely a corporate climber, or was he potentially compromised or actively collaborating with organized crime to gain control of Horizon Air for more sinister purposes? This raised the stakes exponentially. Caroline Whitmore played her part bravely, though fraught with anxiety. Following legal advice coordinated by Horizon Air's general counsel, loyal to Meredith, she documented every interaction with Vance's office. In one carefully managed conversation, recorded legally, Vance didn't explicitly admit to orchestrating the slapping incident, but reiterated his disappointment in staff who were too soft and warned Caroline that her future depended on demonstrating decisiveness in upcoming performance reviews comments that clearly supported her claim of undue pressure. Richard Vance, however, wasn't stupid. He likely sensed the shift, the quiet investigations. He doubled down, calling for an emergency board meeting with the explicit agenda item: vote of no confidence in Chairman Winslow. He presented manipulated operational reports highlighting recent customer service incidents, including Caroline's, and slight dips in on-time performance, blaming Meredith's lack of firm leadership. He stacked the meeting with his allied shareholders, confident he now had the votes to force Meredith out. This forced Meredith's hand. The board meeting, scheduled just 3 days away, would be the battleground. This became their dark night. Did they have enough irrefutable proof? Caroline's testimony was powerful, but could be painted as self-serving. The financial links Daniel found were complex, potentially deniable by Vance. The Black Widow connection, while explosive, was still circumstantial. What if the board, swayed by Vance's manipulated data and shareholder pressure, voted her out before the full truth could be effectively presented? The risk of failure was immense, threatening not just Meredith's position, but the very soul of Horizon Air. Meredith, Isabel, Daniel, and the loyal general counsel worked around the clock, compiling their evidence into a clear, undeniable presentation. They secured sworn affidavits from the employees Isabel had interviewed. They prepared Caroline to testify before the board. Daniel finalized his report on the financial links, ready to present it. They decided to gamble on confronting Vance directly at the meeting, laying bare the entire conspiracy, including the potential Black Widow connection, hoping the combined weight of the evidence and Caroline's testimony would sway the undecided board members and expose Vance before he could secure his victory. The Horizon Air boardroom buzzed with tension. Board members, including the faction allied with Richard Vance, sat around the polished mahogany table. Vance stood at the head, presenting his case against Meredith Winslow with practiced confidence, using charts showing skewed data and citing anecdotal customer complaints, including the infamous gate incident involving Caroline Whitmore. It is clear, Vance concluded, his tone dripping with false regret, that under Ms. Winslow's leadership, operational standards have slipped damaging our brand and profitability. For the future of Horizon Air, a change is necessary. He called for a vote of no confidence. Before the chairman could initiate the vote, Meredith Winslow spoke, her voice calm but commanding immediate attention. Before this board makes a decision based on manipulated data and half-truths, she said, rising slowly, I believe you deserve the full context. She addressed Vance directly. Richard, your ambition is matched only by your ruthlessness. You haven't just fostered a toxic work environment. You have actively conspired to sabotage this airline and my leadership. She then laid out her evidence concisely. The internal emails revealing his strategy to create operational friction, the pattern of pressuring employees, and finally, she called upon Caroline Whitmore. Caroline walked to the front of the room, trembling but resolute. She recounted Vance's threats, the pressure, his implicit instructions to prioritize speed and strictness over customer care. Her testimony was heartfelt, credible, and damning. As she finished, Isabel Moreau distributed folders containing the sworn affidavits from other employees corroborating Caroline's account. Then, Daniel Shapiro stepped forward, presenting his findings on the suspicious financial activities linking Vance's allied shareholders to shell corporations connected to the Black Widow Syndicate. Mr. Vance's campaign appears to be funded, at least in part, by criminal elements seeking to infiltrate Horizon Air, Daniel concluded grimly. Vance erupted, shouting denials, accusing Meredith of orchestrating a smear campaign, calling Caroline a liar, trying to save her job. But his bluster rang hollow against the weight of the evidence. Board members looked shocked, angry, betrayed. The vote of no confidence died before it was even formally called. Instead, a motion was immediately made and passed unanimously. Terminate Richard Vance for cause, effective immediately, and refer all findings to the FBI and FAA for criminal investigation. Vance stared in disbelief as security entered the room to escort him out, his meticulously planned coup collapsing around him in ruins. Richard Vance's downfall was swift. The evidence presented to the board, combined with further investigation by federal authorities spurred by Daniel Shapiro's findings, led to Vance's indictment on charges including conspiracy, wire fraud, and potentially RICO violations due to the Black Widow connection. Several allied shareholders also faced investigation and SEC sanctions. Horizon Air, under Meredith's reaffirmed leadership, cooperated fully, cleaning house of managers loyal to Vance and his methods. Meredith addressed the company, acknowledging the damage done by Vance's actions and reaffirming Horizon Air's commitment to its core values of respect for employees and customers. She implemented new, robust programs focused on employee support, mental health resources, and ethical customer service training, ensuring performance metrics were balanced with human factors. Caroline Whitmore, having faced her mistake with courage and honesty, was required to undergo intensive retraining and counseling, but was ultimately retained by Horizon Air. She became an unlikely advocate within the company, sharing her experience and championing the new focus on empathetic service, slowly rebuilding trust with her colleagues and passengers. She understood the rare second chance Meredith had given her. Meredith, recognizing the need for ongoing cultural reinforcement, established the Winslow's Grace Foundation, funded personally and through corporate contributions, dedicated to promoting ethical leadership and compassionate customer service within the aviation industry and beyond through grants and educational programs. Isabel Moreau became its executive director, while Daniel Shapiro continued his impactful reporting on the industry, often highlighting Horizon Air's transformation. Months later, Meredith was conducting one of her quiet observations at Chicago O'Hare. She saw Caroline Whitmore assisting an elderly passenger struggling with heavy luggage. Her approach patient, kind, genuinely helpful, a warm smile replacing the stressed impatience Meredith had witnessed before. Caroline looked up, saw Meredith watching, and offered a small, grateful nod. Meredith nodded back, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling over her. The slap heard round the internet had paradoxically led to a course correction, purging the rot from within her company and reaffirming the principles upon which she had built it. Forgiveness, she reflected, could be a powerful catalyst for change, turning a moment of profound failure into an opportunity for grace and renewal.